At this point, I have put enough time into Hollow Knight Silksong to definitively say that this game is a massive disappointment. Far from being one of the highlights of the year, this game pales in comparison to other superior Nintendo Switch 2 games like Hitman World of Assassination, like Donkey Kong Bonanza, and like Mario Kart World. This game is cheap. It's lazy. It's a rehash of what came before. And more than anything else, it is by far the lesser game compared to its predecessor. Even if you ignore the fact that Metroid Dread and the various Castlevania collections available on Nintendo consoles are better than this, even if you ignore those games, there is no denying the fact that Hollow Knight, the original, is a much greater game than the sequel DLC, Silksong. Currently, all criticisms of Silksong essentially are swept under the rug by pretending that players are getting filtered or weren't really fans of the original anyway. The reality is, anybody who's spent any amount of time playing Silksong can tell you that the bosses are boring and generic. The locations are samey, the same gray color palette with random platforms strewn everywhere. You have the new mechanics that aren't interesting or fun in any way, shape, or form. Silksong, in essence, is a very good example of what happens when a critically acclaimed game gets a follow-up. Because of the original game's reputation, everybody wants to jump on this game, hype it up as the next big thing, talk about everything it does that make it a masterpiece without even really considering whether or not this game is good. And considering what I've been seeing, how few people have even got all that far into the game, I think it's safe to say that the vast majority of the people praising this have not played much of it at all. I have played more of this game than probably about 70% of the player base. Obviously, there are like hardcore fans who have beaten it already, but for me personally, I have a life and I've been doing things, so I haven't really committed myself to finishing it that quickly. However, I have put a lot of time into it. Probably around 13 hours at this point. I've seen quite a lot of what this game has to offer. And what I found is that the game is just overall very poorly designed. The simplest possible way I can state how Silksong is disappointing is asking people, what does Silksong do better than Hollow Knight? Because when you really look at this game's mechanics and how it's structured and how the bosses are designed, what you see is a dev team attempting to raise the difficulty level of a game and failing to do so. Bosses now all do 2 units of damage. The downward strike, which was an essential tool in the original game, has been so severely nerfed, it's practically worthless. And enemies move all over the place, having multiple flunkies and things flying at the screen trying to knock you off your game and confuse you. You know, there were lots of times where I've gotten hit in this game because of that weird explosive effect that happens when you get hit when you're trying to heal. The game is simply not well designed. I'm not struggling with the enemy design, the level design, the boss design. I'm struggling with things like the hitboxes, like those weird frame-perfect jumps you have to hit in order to counterattack an enemy. The fact that every boss in this game is a massive HP sponge. I cannot begin to tell you how frustrating it is to be darting around a boss, dodging every single one of its attacks, and then find yourself just kind of getting bored of it because the boss just takes too many hits to kill. Silksong is an excellent example of how making a game more difficult doesn't improve the experience in any way, shape, or form. The game isn't better designed. It's not more fun to play. It isn't more satisfying to overcome these challenges. You just end up frustrated with how try hard some of what the game throws at you actually is. At its core, Silksong is a lazy sequel. Oh, bosses did 1 unit of damage in Hollow Knight? Well, in Silksong, they're going to do 2. There's no real thought or consideration put into balancing or pacing or for new players coming in. It is a hastily cobbled together mess that somehow took 8 years to produce. And that is a big, major issue with this game. Something that we really need to talk about as fans of the original is that this took 8 years to produce. Why? Where did all the resources go? What did all the time go into, right? Because it certainly wasn't the environments. It certainly wasn't the mechanics. This is not some radically different game from the original Hollow Knight. Like, it is a DLC. We waited 8 years for a DLC. It is shocking to me, astounding even, that Nintendo was able to put out The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, a much more expansive video game, quicker than Silksong. Keep in mind, Tears of the Kingdom had completely original bosses, new enemies, new mechanics. Like, Tears of the Kingdom felt like a completely new original game. Silksong does not. It feels like a DEI-infested mess, full of bugs. My major takeaway from this, looking at the hype cycle, looking at people trying to obsess over this game, it feels a lot like the same process we went through with Final Fantasy VII R or Metal Gear Solid 4. The previous games in those series were considered these all-time classics that were hugely innovative and were very popular among people who did not play the superior games that were coming out on Nintendo platforms. So Hollow Knight comes out. It's this huge cultural phenomenon. People really like it for what it is. It's not as good as Metroid, but whatever. And then the waiting game. You wait 8 years for a sequel, and then it finally comes out. People are excited. They line up to play it day one, and they start hyping it up as this great milestone of a video game, but it simply just isn't as good as what's come before. That is Silksong. I have seen no innovation in this DLC. I have seen no reason to go out and buy it, especially if you haven't played the original. Silksong to me is the very definition of a bare bones lazy sequel. One that does very little to expand on or evolve the formula from the previous game. If anything, I expect Silksong's existence is going to retroactively make the original worse, because having learned more about Hornet in this game, I can safely say that I no longer consider myself a fan of the character. She just isn't all that interesting of a protagonist to me. She's kind of creepy and weird, and I just don't like looking at her, especially when she takes her dress off. Hollow Knight was a pastiche of a bunch of other Nintendo games to begin with, from Zelda 2 to Pikmin. It took a lot of influences from a lot of better games, but Silksong is even worse about it. There have been several instances where I've played this game where I've just like, oh yeah, that's from Metroid Zero Mission. That's from Zelda 2. That's from this. Like, there are so many things in this game that just blatantly remind me of other better games that exist. And I really have to wonder, like, what is the point of playing this? The Hollow Knight situation has been a really interesting thing to see unravel, because this is the closest that any developer has ever gotten to usurping the Metroid-like genre away from the Metroid games. Everyone universally considered Metroid to be the peak of this style of game, and then Hollow Knight came along, and there was a very big push to try and consider Hollow Knight to be better. But not only is that not true, it fell apart even before the sequel could even really get off the ground. No one who has played a substantial amount of Metroid or Castlevania would ever say Hollow Knight is better, because the level design is better, the music is better, the animations, the story, like, it all just is timeless in a way. Whereas Hollow Knight, even the original, feels really dated in comparison with its really awful looking flash ground animations and its cheesy story, and it's just failure to kind of encompass what makes this style of game so great. I was willing to overlook a lot of Hollow Knight's problems because of all of everything it did for me and the community, but this time the gloves are off. You know, this time playing this game alongside everyone else and like judging it as an actual new release, it does need to be said is that this is not a game that can compete with what Nintendo is doing right now. Mario Kart World was better than this. Donkey Kong Bonanza was better than this. There are dozens of examples of Nintendo games I've played recently that I've enjoyed far more than this. Right now I'm playing Tales of Symphonia for the first time. I am about 3 hours into it, and I did notice while I was playing Silksong that I did genuinely feel as if I would rather go back and play more of Tales of Symphonia than this. It is very telling to me just how the narrative about Silksong basically amounts to this idea that it's popular, so it must be good. Nobody is actually talking about the level design, the structure, the pacing, the combat, the mechanics. Actually, if anything, a lot of people were quick to notice how useless Hornet's Dive was, and fanboys attempted to damage control the situation by saying people were filtered by it. Except for the fact that you can switch the dive out later on in the game, and once you do that, like, there's no real reason to go back to it. Things like that, I think, really strongly indicate that Silksong is already not going to be as fondly remembered as the original. But what's more than that is that I think it really shows just how delusional and out of touch the modern gaming sphere actually is. Because people really thought this was going to be an all-time great video game. People really thought that this was going to be like one of the best games ever made and like one of the games of the generation and this huge milestone accomplishment in independent game design. And the reality is, it just isn't. The reality is, this cannot compete with what Nintendo is doing on their platform. And I think that has become very self-evident as more and more people play the game and experience it and just realize that they're not really having fun with it. All the streamers you're seeing playing this game, all the YouTubers, they're covering this game to get views and attention. They don't really have any real interest in this game and the experience of playing it. They are playing it for the views. They are playing it for the income. They are playing it for the money, right? And I can safely say that this kind of game, this meme game, something that people only play for views and attention, it is something that needs to be condemned by the online gaming community. I am sick to death of people hyping up slop like Fortnite or Apex Legends or Fall Guys because, like, well, they're popular on streams. Like, well, guess what? There are better games out there. I don't want to play games thinking about my view count or about what other people think of what I'm playing. Like, I am a gamer. I play to have games. I play games for fun, okay? And the simple fact of the matter is, I am not having fun with Silksong, and I will be certain to explain to you why over the next several weeks. Thank you for watching my video. Please like, comment, and subscribe.